Welcome to another episode of Adventurous Appetizers, where we dive deep into DM details. Today I'm here with my buddy Tyler.
Hello.
And we are back for another question and answer round. We had a lot of questions that were left unanswered after our last session, and we pulled a few to go into today. And if you want to send more questions to us before we do our next one, just send your questions to alignmentmayvary@gmail.com. Tyler, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. It's been an exciting day. How about yourself?
Very, very well. My wife made cookies, which is probably one of the nicest things that can ever happen in life.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
First question. Any single ladies out there?
Submit your answers to alignmentmayvary.com at gmail.com.
All right. First question. This is from our buddy Jake. Jake asked, when players are in tough combat or puzzle... Okay, Jake, I'm going to have to edit you here. When players are in a tough combat situation or facing a puzzle, how much, if any, nudges or hints do you give to move along the game?
If I put my players in a tough combat situation, it's because I want them in a tough combat situation.
Okay.
I either want to see if they can survive it, or it's a plot device. I don't want them to survive it. They're going to be knocked out and taken somewhere else, that sort of thing. Puzzles, I try to, if they're clearly struggling, I try to help out where I can.
What about as a player? What do you, on the other side of the table, how do you feel when you're in a really tough combat situation?
Oh, I feel like I'm going to be murdered by John. Most frequently, that's how I feel. Like, John is trying to kill me. Not just me, the player, me as a person. Like, I'm going to have a heart attack over here.
This touches on something I just talked about in the last Adventurous Appetizer episode, which is TPKs and how to deal with them. And
yeah, that's really on your mind this week, isn't it?
What it came down to, what I realized was that I think players have the most fun, not when they're being handheld, but when they feel like they understand what's going on and they have control. At least, options. Those options might get them killed, but at least if they understand like what the situation is and what they can do and what doing one thing might lead to, I feel like the game goes better. And again, I'm glad you're here to talk about it, because I was thinking about, my players a lot when I was doing that episode. And it was kind of one of my questions. Like, do you is this true? Do you as a player feel like if you're in a tough situation, but the GM is saying, hey, you can try to fight this thing. You got a really high chance of dying, or you can run and that's going to have these consequences, but it's a better chance of surviving. I mean, does that make it feel better?
Yeah, I guess that makes it a little better than like just an emotionless DM. Like, well, maybe you'll die, maybe you'll live. I'm not going to say anything one way or the other.
I know that frustrated me as a player when I was a player, because and as a player, I don't mind dying. Like, I kind of love it because it forces me to play new stuff. Sometimes it's super epic, but I will admit there were times where I was like, wait, like I would go up against this super tough character and I'd go and like I'd die. I'd feel like I was doing well, but then I'd be killed. And the GM would look at me and be like, oh yeah, he was way above your level. And I'm like, well, I didn't know that. Like, I wouldn't have, if I'd seen the level 60 denoter next to him, I might not have taken him on.
Right. And I think that's, in part, that's on the DM. Like, you have to be able to provide those context clues. Like, if you're facing, a super powered psionic character riding a dragon by yourself, maybe that's when you have to run. Like, don't think, I can take this. It's easy. It's a small dragon.
And part of what Jake asked too is he puts in this thing about moving along the game. Like that's like the end of his question is how many hints do you give to move along the game? And I think that kind of leads to another interesting sort of topic, which is, what is the game, right? Like when we say move along a game, there's no real end scenario in Dungeons and Dragons. It's not like a game of Risk where you're like, we need to speed up the turns here. Dungeons and Dragons is kind of like if you spend 7 sessions in combat because it's a massive combat, that is the game, right?
Yeah, I think part of what he's talking about is that tendency that sometimes happens with DMs to try to railroad the plot forward.
Gotcha.
And I'm not saying it in like a negative, like you shouldn't ever do that, because there's definitely going to be people at the table are sitting there if you're in a puzzle room and they just don't get the puzzle and they're confused and they're sitting there just getting angrier and angrier because their character has a 17 intelligence. Their character should be able to figure this fucking thing out. Sorry to get a...
No, actually, can I tangent off that for just a minute?
For sure.
And say that I think for the most part, puzzles don't work that great in D&D. Like, I've tried them. I've been a part of them. Like, it either takes the GM having gone to the length to build an actual escape room for his group to go through, or you have to have a very specific group that loves puzzles.
Yeah, I agree with that, because even as someone that enjoys puzzles and riddles, like, I've definitely been in situations where the game has ground to a halt for 40 minutes because nobody can figure out the key to unlock this room, or it's a simple riddle that people are struggling with. And it sort of, like I said, it sort of breaks a little bit of the game for me, because it should be okay that my character is smarter than I am. It should be okay that my character is more charismatic than I am. Just in the same way that our characters are generally stronger and faster and hardier than we are. So I don't always feel like in those situations where like you have to solve the puzzle, or this one happens a lot where you're like, you have to persuade the NPC to let you pass.
Now that one I am going to defend, because I think role playing is part of the fun. I know what you're saying. Like, it asks somebody to, like, you need to come up with an inspiring speech on the moment, and then subjectively be like, well, you didn't write as well as Neil Gaiman in that speech, so I'm going to judge it down. But asking the player to actually say something and sort of role play and act, I don't think is a bad thing.
I think it's okay, but
it's when it comes down to judging it.
Yeah.
It's like if the player gets up and is like, okay, I'm gonna get into character and say something and act something, even if what they say is stupid, then you go to the roll and you roll it and you see what the stats say. But I do like the fact that, like, I think it can make it more interesting than just saying, hey, you have to convince this guy, roll a D20 and see if your character does it.
Yeah.
All right. The second question is, do you want to go for this one?
Yeah, I will. This is from Richard Penwarden. He asks, what is your favorite way to generate stats? Rolling 46 and keeping the best 3 numbers, array, point by, 3d6 in order and come what may, something more homebrewy?
I think the method that I find works the best is the 46 and keep the best 3. I mean, this I don't know. I actually now want to do some study and find out when this first started getting used. Probably somewhere in 3rd edition, maybe, but in any case, it's well tested and it works well. It's a nice mix of randomness, but also player choice that I think speaks to the whole game. My personal favorite is grab 3d6 and go down the list, because I like the crazy stuff that forces me to come up with.
Yeah.
Like that's my personal.
You're a lunatic. I definitely I prefer the rolling over anything else, especially with 5th edition. I can see point buying working better in like 3.5 in those more numbers based games. With 5th, because it's so focused on role playing, like anything you can do to take the focus away from min-maxing your numbers is to the benefit of the table. Personally, what I've been doing, because I've taken to rolling every session just in case I die, I'll do the 4d6 and take the top 3, but I take it as those numbers are rolled rather than I have a pool of 6 numbers and I allocate them where I like them. And that's made for some interesting possible, and in fact, the character I'm playing now was rolled that way. So
I think what works best for people will just depend on what they feel, kind of what triggers their creativity. Some people like a lot of control over their stuff, and that's where they feel the most creative, is when you say literally like, do a point buy system, there's no randomness. So the creativity for those people comes in the strategy and knowing all the rules and knowing exactly how to build the character they want to play. That forcing them to do anything else feels like you're stomping on their creativity. You're forcing them to play something they don't want to play. Similarly, when I say I like the 3d6 and just roll down the line, I like that because it forces me to be creative. Like, oh, okay, I've got a guy with intelligence 3 and wisdom 18. Well, what the heck is that? And similarly, I think with you, maybe Tyler, you like the idea of you have some randomness, so the possibilities aren't endless, but you're given a lot of options in how to arrange those numbers once you have them.
Yeah. Usually if it's like the beginning of a campaign, I like to be able to arrange my numbers because usually I'll have a starting idea. But if I'm in the middle of a campaign, I kind of just want to be able to roll pure randomness, just like what's gonna happen if I die? Who's the next person?
Yeah.
I will say I think everyone should be on the same page at a table. Like if one person's gonna do a point buy, everybody should be doing a point buy.
Good point.
Just so that
why do you believe that?
Just so that there's not any sort of imbalance. Like I could see being the person at the table who was like, I'm gonna do things traditionally, and then someone's like, well, I chose to do a point buy, so I don't have a 3 intelligence, and all my stats are balanced and they work. Oh, it's really unfortunate that you can't roll any investigation checks without, tripping over yourself.
Right, of course. That is actually a good point. The next question comes from Jake again. If you add an NPC ally in to help with smaller parties, how do you handle that NPC? Do you hand over the character sheet to player, or does the DM run that character? And this has a lot of good facets to it, I think.
Yeah, I feel like you've covered all of them in the last couple of years of play.
You mean tried all of them?
You've tried as many variations on this theme.
Which, you know what? Let's use that. Let's kind of go through and talk about what the good points were and what the bad points were from both a player and DM perspective.
Yeah.
So to kind of outline this first, I think part of this comes down to bookkeeping, right? It's what is easiest to play at the table versus what is the most fun to play at the table. What makes NPCs, gives them the most options, while also keeping it all very easily manageable. So the very first thing I did was I literally built the NPC character sheet, and I handed that off to the players, and the players kind of decided who was going to play that character, and we went from there. We did that with Rizal the Bloodless, I think. And how did you feel about that, Tyler?
That was fine. It was a little clunky, forcing someone to play a second character that they hadn't planned for at all. Like it had its moments, but it really slowed down kind of combat and a few other role-playing situations where someone was just like, oh, the party rolls perception. Oh, and then I also have this other person roll perception. Somebody rolling twice. Realizing that they were playing a second character, minutes later, and then coming back to it. So it wasn't my favorite system.
I didn't love it either as a DM for a couple reasons. One, I felt like that character it didn't get a character. I mean, it had all the stats, but it didn't get an actual role played personality, because that's what the DM is supposed to be doing, is role playing the NPC. And it was really weird for the DM to be like, I'm role playing this character, but the players are controlling their every action. That just didn't. That's a weird disconnect. It's like two people in a costume running different directions. It doesn't always work. So I didn't love that, and it is a lot more to put on the players to say, hey, I know you love your character, but here's a whole other character. And especially as you get into the higher levels, that becomes pretty rough. So the next thing I tried was I came up with like special rules, which was, and I was actually kind of fond of this. It was I came up with these NPC cards, and they were a little bit like almost like Magic the Gathering cards. Like you had an ally, it had abilities. Some abilities were constant. You could tap it to use other abilities. And then you had this thing where you could like tear up the card and to use like an ultimate attack, and it sacrificed the ally, but they did something super, super beneficial that helped the game for a long time. How did you think on that one?
I liked that one because you were still role playing the character. They just became like this combat ally, or occasionally they would have like role playing social abilities or something like that. Trap finding abilities.
They were kind of like an item.
They were like an item that you could use. The key here was you made the abilities tier well, and they didn't break the game. Having a couple allies didn't make us dominant in combat. Like, it felt like you needed to be in a desperate situation if you were going to throw away that ally, burn up their ultimate ability.
But it happened a couple times, if I remember.
I think so, yeah. A couple of them did end up sacrificing themselves. One of them didn't. One of them survived.
And I seem to remember that it actually made the characters feel a little bit more connected to you guys, because they weren't just personalities, but they were also very useful abilities.
Yeah, it helped for role-playing situations, for sure. And like, when one of those characters disappeared but then reappeared later, it was like a big moment for the party.
I really liked that system. I might have to go back to that at some point.
Well, we just haven't had, many allies recently.
Well, I did get rid of it at a point because I remember specifically feeling like it could be, as we were getting to the higher levels, I was struggling with the balance of the powers, coming up with powers that felt useful but weren't game breaking. And D&D 5 is the numbers are so the range is so small. If you go too far, like a +1 is a big deal. Always, even at 12 or 20, +1 often makes the difference between getting hit or not, or hitting somebody or not. And so it's hard to tier up those abilities. So I'm glad to hear I did it well, but I definitely remember it taking a lot of work to balance. And then the third thing that I've done more recently is I kind of throw out a personality. I kind of build stats on the side, but they're very, very broad stats. And it's sort of like I do roll dice for the NPCs. I base them off of generally some kind of stat out of the existing monster manuals, but it's very, very loose. And sometimes I just have a series of in my heads like, this guy's got a +4 to hit, and he does 2d8 damage. And I just kind of roll that with it as it goes, which is it's very loose and easy to run. I mean, the benefit here is there's no bookkeeping except for sometimes keeping track of health. And it lets you have a lot of freedom with the character. The downside is I don't think it gives you guys like any real mechanical. It doesn't add anything to the game mechanically.
It doesn't add anything to the game mechanically, but I feel like if a DM wants to interject a long-term NPC that basically they're like, I'm going to play it, I'm going to run it, that's the way they should be going about it. Like, you don't need a full character sheet for that person. is just going to slow everything down. Just make them like essentially a monster that works on the side of the party. You can still get all the role playing aspects that you want with them. You can still have kind of like a quick mental inventory for like, okay, if they're going to be in a dungeon with a party, like, are they good at finding traps? What will I roll for that? How's their passive perception? That sort of thing. I like it as a long-term DM NPC.
And you mentioned as part of that perception, which really takes us on to our next question.
I know, I'm secretly really good at segueing. This is from Reddit user, it is Evening in the Carrot Patch. As a DM, what is a good way to use perception? And I think he's talking about using perception so it's not just like a boring skill, also not putting a barrier up in situations within the game. Like, you're not missing out on something cool because you have not rolled a high enough perception.
Because perception, what are your thoughts on this? Perception, it has kind of become, right, like the ubiquitous skill.
I feel like it's a little bit overused. There's definitely reasons for it, but I feel like, and this is just in our game, and games that I have DM'd, because I wasn't good at keeping track of it when I was DMing, but 5th edition gave you an out with the passive perception. Like, as long as you have your party's passive perception checks, you shouldn't have to make them roll perception. Like, because that phrase, roll perception, like, you're setting the stage for something.
Right. You kind of tipped your hand a little bit, right?
Yeah, and I feel like that's why passive perception is really good. Like, you're in a cave. There's a party of drow sneaking up on you. Is anybody going to notice that? You could either say, roll perception, and then the whole party is like, there's a bunch of drow sneaking up on us, aren't there? No, just roll the dice. Or you can look at your party's passives and be like, okay, this person's got a 16. Like, Jeffrey, you hear something behind you.
You know what? It is a really good mechanic. I actually think it's been underused. I know I haven't really used it at all. And I think it's because we're so mired in the culture of, active, like a game should be active where the player should be rolling. And perception, I think, has become the lazy GM's way to fill the void with noise. So if nothing's happening, well, I want my players to do something. I want them to feel like they're rolling. Roll perception.
Right? Yeah. Because I feel like they have investigate and insight. So, like, if you're in a social situation, well, there's a skill to roll that's not perception that you can use. If you're looking around a room for traps or something, it's not perception, it should be investigation or find trap.
Going back to old D&D, find trap. I like I think I'm actually pretty guilty of overusing perception.
Yeah.
It's one of the things that as you GM, people who GM, you learn over time. You find out what your weaknesses are, where you're relying on bad habits, and relying on perception rolls is a bad habit for me. I've more and more tried to move away from them. And I think actually our next session, Tyler, I'm going to officially announce that I'm going to passive perception.
Oh, nice.
I've been thinking about it for a while.
I feel like perception is the type of skill that I'm going to say 6 or 7 times out of 10 should be initiated by the player and not the DM.
That's a really good point, actually. Yeah. And I will respond to the second part of that question, which was, the second part of what we interpret the question to be, which is, does it make the game boring? Like, do you cut out the good details? And I actually gonna say, yeah, like that is a problem with perception. The way that perception is used a lot is you sort of have these descriptions in the book in front of you, and you ask your player, well, roll perception. Oh, you didn't roll high enough to hear the super cool detail about this dungeon. Like, how boring is that? Like, we all of us when we're DMs, right, and we read through a campaign, you'll find that your eyes and your mind are just excited by certain phrases, whether it's like they're usually little details in a dungeon, the body in the corner, the rubies that outline a statue's, crown, a secret door that you don't know where it goes to.
The intertwined snakes on a treasure standing on a plinth.
Yeah. I mean, it's just these are super cool little details that build the world. And if perception means you either go through the, your graphics card isn't good enough to load these details version of the world versus like, all the textured version, you always want to go for the textured version. If you're feeling yourself as a DM, you're actually feeling bad because they missed a perception roll and thus they don't get to see the super cool thing that you have planned. Just show them the super cool thing and stop asking them to roll perception.
Yeah. It might be a more old school sense to dungeons, but if your party's going to go through a room and miss the secret door that's going to be a shortcut past a bunch of traps, or, the button that's going to reveal a buttload of treasure, it's on them to look for that stuff. It's not on you to, roll perception. Oh, there's nothing in this room. You didn't roll high enough. Sorry, just keep going. Oh no, we're going to spend an hour of you poring over this room for no reason in game.
Yeah, there is a sort of a character buy-in that's required from that, where it's like, hey, if you fail your perception roll, you got to pretend like you really don't know there's anything here. But again, I think that's what passive perception, that's what you point out passive perception solves.
Yeah, I've always thought it was a very elegant thing. And again, I'm guilty as a DM of forgetting it all the time, but just like, just set a perception difficulty. If your players can make it, then fine. If not, then they miss it. If it's something super crucial, then, there's probably a better way than just having the whole party roll perception.
This is my New Year's, well, we're not at the New Year. This is my old year's resolution. I'm going to stop using perception. I'm going to stop using perception by the end of the year. It's going to be passive perception all the way, baby. All the way.
Yeah.
Unless I really, really want them to have to figure out if they can see that archer in the trees at 100,000 yards away.
At 100,000 yards?
And what he's wearing.
Right.
All right. So we have one more question we're going to answer before we go into our bonus round. We have a special bonus round planned tonight with a little contest, which I'll go into in a minute. But bonus question. This is a very Jakey episode, but Jake had a lot of questions and I want to answer them. And Jake actually had a follow-up question to his NPC question. Hey, so what happens when your party kills a critical to the story NPC? What do you do?
Oh.
It's a good question.
Well, the easy shortcut is make another critical NPC. Like,
absolutely.
That's the short and easy answer. The more satisfying answer, I feel like, from a DM's perspective, is punish them.
Well,
let's.
Okay.
Your critical NPC had information about a cult that was targeting a specific player character. And he was gonna tell you guys, but you murdered him. Well, that cult is gonna fucking come for you, and you have no idea that it's gonna happen. You'll find out. You'll still find out. Okay, it's gonna be a lot more surprising. You're gonna wish you would roll some more perception checks.
Tyler puts out a really good point about Dungeons and Dragons, which is there is driving the story forward, and there is also consequence. And for me, the most important word to Dungeons and Dragons or any RPG is consequence. That's what makes these games stand out above any other gaming experience, is that it is the biggest sandbox ever. Because literally, we can react to what's happening as it's happening. It doesn't all have to be preordained. And that's what's so amazing. That's when you get into that world, if you are in a really good game of Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder or whatever, as a player, you get this feeling of like, wow, everything I do and touch here leaves a mark. And good GMs will run with that. And this is why if a player is really feeling that, they're not going to abuse it. They're not going to go around slaughtering an entire village just to see what happens.
Yeah, because what happens is, well, John's been in this experience. It wasn't an important NPC, but
and it wasn't an entire village. Hold on, I'm gonna give myself. Judge and jury was out on this. I was exonerated. It was not an entire village,
right?
And I thought he was an asshole. I mean, I thought he was a bad guy.
This is valuable because you failed your insight checks. You didn't realize the pirates were lying to you.
Hold up,
have we murdered an innocent man and his wife?
Have we told this story before?
Have we not? I feel like we should have. This story should live in legend.
Let's do this. Let's tell the story, and if it's in the episode, guys, that means that we didn't tell it before.
It's a perfect example of consequence if your players make drastic overreactions and murder NPCs. We were running the Princes of Apocalypse campaign, and John and another player had encountered some of the river pirates.
I should say I was playing a pirate named a reformed pirate named Moriarty LeChuck.
Yeah, he was playing a semi-reformed pirate as foreshadowing.
He also spoke like this.
All of your characters had ridiculous voices in that game. Anyway, John and this other character had met some river pirates and were trying to get information from them. They failed their insight checks when talking to them, so they totally believed this pirate was just an honest businessman being overtaxed by the headman of this small town, and if they went and talked him down from the taxes, they could get all the information they wanted from this river captain.
And to be fair, we as players also believed this. we did not suspect that this wasn't the case.
Yeah, They rolled so badly on all their checks, I never had the opportunity to be like, guys, this is a pirate.
Nope, we were just like, yep.
They're like, cool, this is the way we get information. So the other character became invisible and hid inside the house while John came and decided he was going to threaten the mayor of this small little village.
In front of his children and wife, right?
In front of his wife and children while she was making soup.
It made it more threatening.
It failed. The wife attacked John with the soup. And John's reaction was to use the Shape Water spell to pull the boiling soup away from him and just surround the headsman's head. So,
best use, most creative use of Shape Water ever.
Agreed. So he killed the mayor of a small town and his wife and orphaned their children.
If you want the cantrip Shape Water, it's a cantrip, isn't it?
Yeah.
A simple spell. Whatever. If you want it to be a truly deadly spell, just make sure you're always carrying around burning soup.
And so my response was, okay, the children saw you. The townspeople are coming out to investigate the screaming. You guys, your party is now bandits.
Yeah.
By the way, the pirate captain, he was a pirate captain. He was lying to you, fled while you were murdering this man, so you also didn't get any information.
Can I carry that on, actually? If you don't mind. And so the other side of this is having a character without consequence. We had later in that same game, our buddy Kayvon, who you all know, played a vampire character, but there really wasn't any. I mean, he was super powerful, but there wasn't really a lot of consequence to him being a vampire.
It was early enough in 5th edition. There wasn't a concrete way for me to have him build a vampire PC, and I accidentally let him be far too broken.
Which even, and at the time I was a younger, less experienced player and felt like I was frustrated by the brokenness of the character. But these days, what I realized, it wasn't anything to do with his combat ability. It was that we had a vampire walking around with us, and like nobody was like really, the world wasn't changing the way that Tyler had done such a good job of changing it all the way up until then. This was a world where I killed the mayor of a small town and the rest of the game was changed because of it. But now we had a vampire walking around with us, I think in daylight.
Well, he was like completely covered and he never like attacked anybody.
Gotcha.
There was very few opportunities for like people to realize that he was a vampire and be like, oh fuck, kill this thing.
But I think just in the telling of these two stories, one has a whole story to tell, which is the one with consequence, and one doesn't have a story to tell because it's we had a vampire on our team and it was cool. And I think that just shows you like the what consequence adds to a game experience. So yes, if your NPC dies, I think Tyler threw out the best advice right away, which is don't let your game just end because the NPC they needed is dead now. You're the DM, create another NPC. But also don't let them get away with it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right,
Definitely.
Should we move on to our bonus round?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to explain what this is. This is a little bit of a game and a contest and just fun time. Both Tyler and I have come up with about 15 to 20 questions for the other person, the other GM player. And what we're going to do is I'm going to give Tyler a minute and I'm going to see how many questions he can get through in a minute. He's got to give good answers, but he's also got to try to keep them short. Fully answer the question in as short a time as possible to make it through as many as he can. And then he's going to do the same to me. The winner will end up getting a free fate point to use in our next game. I will take a fate point this time. The GM can do a reroll if I win.
Oh,
so
wait, that's an inspiration. You just get to fudge a number.
Oh, no, inspiration. That's what I meant. Inspiration. Oh, okay. Free inspiration. So there's a lot on the line here. Your whole party is relying on you here.
This is going to be a group inspiration or a personal inspiration?
Well, personal, but I know you. You use them for the group.
We'll see.
You're such a good guy.
All right.
I'm
invested now. Let's do this.
I'm going to start my timer. So this is the bonus round. Let's see if you can get a combo. All right, here we go. And I will start as I ask the first question. Boom. All right. Map with figurines or theater of the mind?
Depends on the situation. I generally prefer theater of the mind.
Favorite monster?
Kobolds.
Least favorite monster?
Those stupid Githyanki psychic ladies with the magic.
Favorite weapon to use?
Longsword.
Most annoying thing anyone can do in a game?
Take too long during combat.
Coolest magic?
Coolest magic school or spell or what?
You decide.
Evocation.
The first thing you think of when you think D&D?
D20.
Best color for a wizard's robe?
Purple.
Best familiar?
Raven.
Worst D&D 5 rule?
Fuck. That one's hard. Worst D&D 5
and
rule
out
is... Oh, God. How many did I get?
You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and you were working on 10.
Ah.
All right. Should I keep time here? Or do you want to keep time on your end?
I can keep time.
Okay.
Favorite DM's table.
Favorite DM's table. A big, long one made of real wood.
Okay. Favorite, like, table to roll on.
Okay. I like random encounters.
Favorite environment?
Forest.
Favorite organization in Faerun?
Oh, geez. That's got to be the, I'm not going to get the name right, but it's the guys who are the shadowy organization, the Zentarum. Woo!
All right. Module that you most want to play?
Ooh, I most want to play Ravenloft.
Favorite module you've ever played?
Favorite module I've ever played. That has to be the original Undermountain.
All right. Favorite subclass?
It's gonna be subclass like okay, I gotcha. Like Path of a Barbarian or something.
Yeah.
That's a really tough one. I like the Barbarian subclasses. I like them all.
Time.
How many did I get?
I'm giving you the all barbarian subclasses.
You know what? Give me the DM table one.
I did give you the DM table one.
Oh, okay,
because
okay.
I asked that question poorly. So you got.
I don't think I got the class one. Don't give me the class one.
Well, you only got 6 then.
Oh, either way, I go down. That's it. Inspiration for the group for Tyler.
I had a bunch of really good questions too.
We'll save them for another bonus round. I'd like to do this again sometime and get some more questions going, and also maybe do it live on Twitch. So we will be back with more Adventurous Appetizers, and we will be back with more questions and answers. Well, we'll be back with answers. I hope you're back with questions. And Tyler, do you have any final words to say before we sign off?
I think we kind of covered everything.
There is one question I do want to give a shout out to. We didn't get to it this time, but I think it is a really good question. I don't remember who asked it. So if this is your question, let us know at alignmentmayvary@gmail.com, and I'll give you credit. But it was very, very good question. As a DM, what is the best way to learn a campaign in preparation for play?
That's definitely a question that we're going to answer next time.
Well, what I actually thought we might do is make this its own Adventurous Appetizers episode, because I think it's a really good instructional question, but I'd love to have you on for that episode, Tyler.
Oh yeah, that would be fun.
So just that'll be coming up sometime. We will cover that in its own episode. So that was it. Until next time, may you roll many a critical success. May you avoid many a critical failure. But above all, keep on rolling.
And try not to murder too many NPCs.
Take care.